All right, welcome back to the channel. My name is Michael. In today's video, we're going to be talking about a couple rumors that just came out in the NHL that relate to the New Jersey Devils. Now, obviously, they are just rumors, but usually when this specific insider tweets something about your team, you usually listen. Um, when you think about the top insiders in the NHL who break news and stuff like that and spread rumors around. You think of, Elliot Friedman, you think of Bob McKenzie, which Bob McKenzie is retired now, so he doesn't even break news anymore. Um, but one of the names that have recently grown into the breaking news era within hockey is Kevin Weeks. Kevin Weeks broke onto the scene a few years ago by breaking something that people were like, I don't even know what the first breaking news he did, but he did like a really funny video where he like looked into the camera weird. I mean, you could say it's kind of cringy, whatever. Either way, he broke news, and people were like, "Whoa, Kevin Weeks is breaking news." He usually is just, like on the panel on ESPN or whatever, doing like color commentary, for ESPN or whatever, or NHL Network. I think he also works for, but he has been breaking news for the last like 3, 4, maybe 5 years. I can't remember the first one he did. I think it was like 4 years ago now, but he's been breaking news, and he's not really a rumor guy. He doesn't really post rumors. Like a guy who's really heavy on posting rumors is Frank Saravalli. A lot of people don't like Frank Saravalli because they feel he purely just posts speculation, and a lot of it ends up not coming to fruition. Not to say that the rumors that he posts are wrong. Like those are definitely rumors that are floating around within the hockey world, but a lot of people think he just purely posts speculation as opposed to any material behind it. Like he'll post something, then it'd be like, "Oh, the Devils are looking to trade, let's just say a random player, Dawson Mercer." And it's like we'll see, they've been talking to teams, and it's like it makes it seem like there's a trade imminent or there's a trade going to happen soon, and then nothing happens and he's never traded. um Kevin Weeks is not like that though. When he posts a rumor, it's a real rumor. Again, I don't want to take a shot at Frank Saravalli. I'm just using him as an example of someone who posts a lot of rumors and a lot of speculation, and you have to take that with a grain of salt, and you have to just be like, okay, this is just a rumor. There's no real weight to it. We have to wait and see. Again, no offense, Frank Saravalli. But when Kevin Weeks does it, you do have to kind of listen because he doesn't really do it that often. Um, and I don't think he's really ever been wrong. Now, the two rumors that he broke the rumors was, and I want to get this right, is that he said there's nothing imminent, but it looks like Nico Hischier will sign an extension with the Devils in a mid-range for between 11 mil a year and 13 mil a year. And we'll jump into that one first, but let me say the second one. The second one is that the New Jersey Devils are gauging the trading market for Jacob Markstrom. So there's a lot to unpack there. Now, I do want to preface by saying this. The Devils can't sign Nico Hischier till July 1st. And although I do believe that they are able to sign or trade Jacob Markstrom prior to July 1st, let me take a look here. His I think his modified 20 team no trade clause doesn't kick in till July 1st. So I don't think that both of these moves probably won't happen until July 1st, unless Markstrom waives his deal early or whatever. But I don't think the T-shirt one can't happen until July 1st if they were to extend him. Markstrom one probably wouldn't happen until July 1st, minimum. But let's jump into the Nico Hischier one because I think that this is really interesting and really juicy. So there's two portions of that. Well, there's three portions. The big one meaning that it sounds like a contract is imminent. It's coming. Nico Hischier will re-sign with the New Jersey Devils on an extension when he is available to sign an extension. Which, if that's true, that's huge. Now, again, these are just rumors. Anything can happen. We're still 2 weeks away or so from free agency from July 1st. So we don't know. Now, a very interesting to notice is that Nico Hischier is not a free agent this year. He is a free agent, an unrestricted free agent next season. And you're probably thinking, okay, well, if he's an unrestricted free agent next season, why are we so focused on an extension now? because you don't want this to linger. You don't want a situation because this happens too many times in the NHL where a player is up for extension, which starts a year before their contract ends, which is July 1st, the year prior to their contract extending, or before their contract expiring. And you say, oh, we're gonna wait and see, and then training camp happens, and you're like, oh, we're gonna wait and see. And then the season starts, and then the team plays poor, which the Devils have played poor the last few years, minus the 22-23 season. And then December rolls around, and you have an unrestricted free agent that you want to resign, and your team's terrible. And he's like, well, I don't want to resign here. We're terrible. So you trade him, and you trade him for not that much that you could have traded for him in the offseason. On top of that, you could have a Mitch Marner situation where you're like, okay, we're a really good team. Well, let's say the Devils are a good team next year and they make the playoffs, but they go out in the first round or the second round, and then you can't get a contract deal done. Then they hit the open market and you lose them for nothing. Or you trade them for pennies on the dollar and you trade their unrestricted free agent rights and someone signs him to a long-term deal. That's exactly what happened with Mitch Marner, and he just led the playoffs in points. He didn't win the Stanley Cup, but he led the playoffs in points with Vegas. You know, Toronto didn't get an extension done. They said, we'll kick it down the road, and they didn't. Now, again, Marner should have been traded before that, but that's just an example. You want to sign your players to an extension as soon as possible if they are a corner piece player. You don't want to prematurely sign extensions. But Nico Hischier is a corner piece player for the New Jersey Devils, and they need to sign to an extension July 1st. Now, there's two interesting notes about this tweet. A midterm deal and the 11 to 13 million range per year. Now, I have a list here of salary caps per year in the NHL, but we'll get into that secondly. Firstly is the mid-year range. So I know with the CBA contract extensions have changed. Originally, you were allowed to sign your own players to 8 years and free agents to 7 years. Now I think you can only sign your players to 7 year extensions, and free agents can only sign a max of 6 years. I don't know which year that takes into effect. So that might be this year, that might have been last year. But either way, a midterm range contract in terms of length is interesting because what is midterm? It's not 1 year, it's not 2 years. It could be as little as 3 years. Like the Devils could sign Nico Hischier to only a 3 year deal. To me, mid-range sounds like 4 years, maybe five, but four sounds like the best spot. Now that scares me a little bit for two reasons. One, that means that you're gonna have to go through this process again sooner than what you had to be. You would be at the end of the contract if it was 7 years now. Nico Hischier is what, 26, 27 years old? If Nico Hischier is 26 on July 1st, actually, let me look this up. Let me look up how old Nico Hischier will be on July 1st. He's 27 right now. He will be 27 on July 1st. His birthday was in January. Wow, he's 27. That's crazy to me. But Nico Hischier's 27. If he signs a 4 year deal, that means he becomes an unrestricted free agent when he's 31 years old, which is in the back end, coming on the back end of his peak, the back end of his prime, which means that in 4 years you will have to then again re-sign a star player. Whereas if it was 7 years, the contract would end when he's 34. And while it sounds like that 3 years doesn't really sound all that much, it makes a huge difference because signing a 34-year-old and signing a 31-year-old are two different things. The years between 31 and 34 are so transitional for a player that for some players, they'll sign a contract at 31 and not even be in the league at 34. Or they might sign a contract at 31 and be just as good as they are 34. But it's very rare that a 31-year-old is better than they are at the age of 34. It just does not happen in the National Hockey League all that much. But the problem is that if you have to re-sign him as a 31-year-old, you have to re-sign him with the thought process of the salary cap is going up, one, and two, what has he done in these 4 years since we signed him? If Nico Hischier wins the Selke Trophy and the Devils make the playoffs and he does great in the playoffs, he's going to want to be paid based on what he's done over the last 4 years of the deal. And Is he going to play his 28, 29, 30, and 31 season just as good in his 32, 33, 34, and 35 season plus? Probably not, but you're going to have to pay him like that. So that's something that's concerning, even though I would rather have Nico Hischier. Well, actually, here's the thing now that I'm thinking about it. If he signs a 4 year extension, it's 5 years after. So he'll be re signing as a 32-year-old. But again, it could be 3 years. He could be 31. This sounds to me like he will re sign with the thought process of becoming an unrestricted free agent again between the ages of 31 and 33, which again, 31 and 33 is very difficult, is very different, not difficult, very different years in terms of free agency status. Um, if I could today, I would sign Nico Hischier to a 7 year deal, and he would have one more year. He'd be 28 next year when it kicks in, and then we would go 7 years, and that would bring him till he's 35. And then that would, after 35, you can go, depending on how long his career is, wherever his career is going, you can make a decision on what you want to do with him. But if he signs a 4 year extension, you only have 5 years left and he becomes a free agent at 32 again. What are you going to do with him at 32? Because what you're going to do with him at 32 is a lot of different than what are you going to do with him at 35. So if I were the Devils, I would try to get a 5 year deal. If that is the case where it's going to be a mid range deal, which is 3 to 5 years, um, I would try to get him on 5 years because then you get 6 years of him and becomes an unrestricted free agent at 33, as opposed to 31 or 32. Now, Nico Hischier might say, I want a 3 to 4 year deal because I want to test myself in 3, 4 years and see if I can make more money, or if the Devils aren't a good team, which no offense to the Devils, they haven't done enough to show to Nico Hischier that they're a good enough team. He could say, trade me, or I'm going to leave in free agency because I gave you with the final year of my deal plus the extra 3, 4 years, I give you that time to build a cup contender. If you can't do that, Sonny Maeda, then I want out. And I want to go to a team where I can win a cup. So for Nico Hischier's sake, in terms of term, that makes a ton of sense for him. For the Devils, I feel like you need to try to get 5 years. I mean, I think you want to get 7 years, but if the rumor is he wants midterm, I would try to get that fifth year so you could have him under control for 6 total years. Um, so that's the first note is the years. The second note is the per year contract, 11 to 13 million. I'm just gonna say it straight up, that's a lot of money. If that's rumored to be true, that's a lot of money. Now I don't want to anticipate anything because I don't want to assume anything, but I would feel like that number would come down. 11 to 13 per year range is pretty high for Nico Hischier. I love Nico Hischier, and I think that, he sacrifices a lot of offense for his defensive game. Um, but if he was to get $12 million, I would be happy with the signing because I'm definitely thinking I would rather have Nico Hischier at $12 million a year for 4 years than not have Nico Hischier on my team. But I would definitely think it would be a little bit of an overpay. You know, I mean, let's just take a look a little bit about current salaries for centers in the National Hockey League for the 26-27 season. So this is not when the 27 season kicks in, which is when his contract will kick in. But let's just look at next year because there's going to be players who are going to become unrestricted free agents. There's going to be RFAs that still need to sign in 27. Coming up, Celebrini and Bedard are just two of them. But right now, the highest paid centers are McKinnon at 14 mil, Eichel at 13.5 mil. I also should say the year that these contracts kicked in. So they might not, I don't have the year that they were signed because some might have signed a year prior as an extension, so but Draisaitl's kicked in 2025, so a year ago, 14 mil. Eichel, 13.5 mil a year. That kicked in 2026, so it kicks in this year. Austin Matthews, 13.25 mil. That kicked in 2024. McKinnon, 12.6. That kicked in 2023, so like 3 years ago. McDavid, 12.5. That kicks in this year. He signed a two-year 12.5 mil, kind of prove it to me, Edmonton, to keep me kind of deal. Elias Pettersson, 11.6. That's a tough deal. 11.6 mil. That one started in 2024. I also have players that can play center as well. Marty Necas plays wing, he can play center, but I have Marty Necas, 11.5 mil. That one kicks in this year, 2026. William Nylander, another guy who can play wing and center, 11.5 mil. That one kicked in 2024. Adrian Kempe, 10.6 mil. That kicks in this year, 2026. Alexander Barkov, 10 mil. That one is the oldest one on this list. That one kicked in 2022. And then Logan Cooley, 10 mil. That kicks in this year at in 2026. Some other notable centers and their contracts. Sebastian Aho, who just won the Stanley Cup with Carolina, 9.75 mil. That one kicked in 2024. So that one was signed about 2, 3 years ago. I don't remember if that was an extension. I'm pretty well, they're all going to be extensions because they never hit free agency, but I'm not sure if that was signed how long before free agency that was signed. I assume it was relatively far away from free agency because of how good Carolina is and how much Sebastian Aho means to that organization. Braden Point, 9.5 mil. Another guy who that contract was signed a while ago. That one kicked in 2022, so that kicked in 4 years ago. Um, Matthew Barzell, 9.15 mil. That one kicked in 2023, so 3 years ago. Dylan Larkin, 8.7 mil. That one kicked in also 3 years ago, 2023. And Sam Reinhart, 8.625 mil. That one kicked in 2024. Really good deal for Reinhardt, actually. The fact that Barkov is making only 10 mil and Reinhardt's only making 8.6 mil from Florida, Bill Zito did a really good job with those contract signings. Um, the thing that scares me about this Nico Hischier contract is, let's say the 11 to 13 mil range is correct. And let's say it goes split down the middle, 12 mil. Nico Hischier will be being paid around the same money as he would just be getting paid shy of McKinnon, McDavid, more than Natchez, more than Nylander, more than Barkov and Kempe, even though those were signed at different times. And no offense to Nico Hischier, I don't think Nico Hischier is worthy to be a top five, top 10 paid center in the NHL. Now, there are other players on this list that don't deserve to be in this list, like Elias Pettersson, Adrian Kempe. Those guys don't deserve to be paid like top 10 centers. No offense to Kempe and no offense to Elias Pettersson. At one point, Elias Pettersson was a top 10 center in the league. He's seen regression, and Kempe just signed his contract this year. But Kempe and Pettersson are not top 10 centers. Now, obviously, with Nico Hischier signing, this is a fresh new signing. So there are other players who are going to get paid, like Bedard, like Celebrini, like other upcoming UFAs. I would have to take a look at the UFA list for next season, and other RFAs. So realistically, where does Hischier fall on this paid list if he does get between 11 and 13 mil? He would fall top 10 in centers. And then when that kicks in, he'll still probably be around top 10. Is Nico Hischier a top 10 paid center? No. Should he be top 20? Yes. I think Nico Hischier should be a top 10 paid center or a top 20 paid center in the National Hockey League, but I don't think he should be top 10. Now again, he is a restricted or an unrestricted free agent next year, so you have to pay him. You can't just lowball him and expect him to sign. But 11 to 13 mil per year is still a lot. I think it's a little too much. If I could, I would keep it in between the 10 and 11 million range. And you're probably sitting here like, what does that 1 to 2 million difference matter? Well, it matters a lot because if you save that 1 to 2 million, you could put that 1 to 2 million into something else. That 1 to 2 million that you saved on Nico Hischier can be used to sign a free agent. You might need that extra mil, that extra half mil that gets you over the edge to sign a piece that helps you win a Stanley Cup. You know, if anything over 11 mil to me is an overpay for now, anything under 10 is an underpay. I think between a 10 and 11 is something I would really like for Nico Hischier, especially on a shorter deal. If he signs a 4 year, 10.5 mil deal or 10.75 deal, anything under 11, I would be like, that's a good signing for the Devils. It's high, it's expensive. He now becomes the most paid Devils player, but I'm happy with that. I think that is a fair signing. Anything over 11, and I'm like, anything between 11 and 12, I'm fine with. I'm like, I'm cool with it. I think it's an overpay. Anything over 12, I think it's a huge overpay. If he gets like 12 and a quarter, I'm going to be like, that's too much. That's too much. That's about a mil and a half, 2 mil too much for Nico Hischier per year. But again, I think signing Nico Hischier, even if it is to 12 mil a year, is more valuable than trading him or letting him go in free agency next year, or even waiting on the season and seeing how he's going to do, and then kicking it down the road. I think that's still more valuable. That's still more valuable, you know. So those are my kind of thoughts on the Nico Hischier thing. I'm really excited for him to sign. I want him to be a Devil his whole life. I want him to lift the Stanley Cup as a Devil. He's one of my favorite players of all time. Um, but I'm just gonna be happy that he signs. So if I had to put a prediction on what the contract will be, I'll put my prediction in at 4 years, and I'll say it actually comes down. I'll say it goes to 11 mil per year. I'll say he gets paid 11 mil per year, you know, because I think that he's better than Kempe. And I think he's gonna say I'm better than Adrian Kempe. Pay me like I'm better than Adrian Kempe, you know? So, and Kempe's getting paid this year. So I think he's gonna get 11 mil. I'm gonna say 4 years, 11 mil. Anything under that, and I'd be very happy. 44 mil, I think would be perfect for him. Well, perfect for both sides. So that's the first topic of conversation is Nico Hischier extension, which is positive. The next one is one that I mean, we talked about these in videos, Nico Hischier and about Jacob Markstrom. I won't do back history on either players in this video, but um, I did a video on what should the Devils do with their goaltending, and I said I was fine with the tandem being Markstrom and Allen to start the year because who know Markstrom could be just as good as he was 2 years ago. Um, but I do like that Meta is looking at the market to move off from him. Um, Now, moving off from Markstrom would have to come with another move to bring in another goalie. So trading Markstrom is just half of the puzzle, half of a piece of a puzzle to solve goaltending in New Jersey. Um, Now, some people have probably been thinking like, oh, well, what we were linked to Wallstead, you know, earlier in the season. We were linked to Hellebuck a couple of years ago. The problem with that is that you have to think of this as a new regime. Every rumor that you heard prior to Fitzgerald being fired, I think is null and void now. It is a brand new regime. It is a brand new guy who has his own preferences, his own connections that I think everything is back on the table. If they trade Markstrom, everything is on the table. What are they going to do? Who are they going to get? The problem with goaltending in the NHL is that there's not enough good goaltenders, but there's not enough bad goalies, if that makes sense. Or no, sorry, let me rephrase that. There's not enough good goalies in the league. Every team could use a good goalie, could use a goalie, just in general. But there's too many goalies signed. So I went through every team on Puckpedia and I made a list of teams that could use a goalie. I made a team that needs a goalie and teams that could use a goalie. Only one team made the list for teams that need a goalie. And this isn't like obviously there are teams that need a goalie, like Pittsburgh needs a goalie. But I also did it with teams that need a goalie and teams that I legitimately think the Devils would trade him to. I don't think anyone in the Metro the Devils would trade Jacob Markstrom to. That just sets you up for a terrible karma time. I don't think they want to trade him within the Eastern Conference in general. So I do have two Eastern Conference teams on this could use a goalie list slash might use a goalie, but I think ideally the moves move into the Western Conference because you only meet him theoretically twice in the regular season, and you wouldn't meet him in the playoffs until you go to the Stanley Cup Finals. Um, the only team that I have that legitimately needs a goalie and would need Markstrom is Edmonton. I've mentioned I don't think I've mentioned Edmonton in a video yet, but Edmonton, I've done voice memos on this before on my phone. Edmonton lost two straight Stanley Cup Finals because their number one problem was their goaltending. I almost said goal scoring. That's not the case at all. Goaltending. It is a crime that you had one of the best, if not the best playoff performances in NHL history with Connor McDavid winning the Conn Smythe as a loser, on the losing team, and your starting goalie was Stuart Skinner and Calvin Pickard. That's a shame. That's is criminal that those are the two goalies in net. If you lose with a good goalie in net, hey, your team's just not good enough. It is what it is. But if you lose because your goaltending is the main reason why you lose, that's on you, especially in back-to-back years. Um, they don't have Skinner anymore. They traded him. They have Jari now. Jari was terrible for them. They still have Connor Ingram, who they got from Utah. He wasn't great. I think they still have Calvin Pickard on the team, in the minors in the organization. He plays, he doesn't play. I don't know. They need a goalie, Edmonton, and I do think that Markstrom would be their guy. I think that they would trade for Markstrom and they would be like, all right, buddy, you're playing 60 games, maybe 65 for us this year. You know, we're giving you McDavid, we're giving you Draisaitl, we're giving you Zach Hyman, Ryan Nugent Hopkins, we're giving you these really star talented players. Evan Bouchard, who's incredible offensively, led the league in points for a defenseman. Like, we're giving you these star talents, just please make the big save and just be decent for us because we haven't got decent goaltending since Mike Smith. And fans were ragging on Mike Smith when he was our goalie. Um, Prior to Mike Smith, the last good goalie for them was like Cam Talbot in like 2016. So they need a guy. They need a guy bad. And I think Markstrom would be a good veteran goalie for them because I think they're in their eyes, they're thinking we're like a move or two away from being a cup contender. Hey, we made it to the Stanley Cup Finals 2 straight years in a row. This year was bad. We lost in the first round, um, but we've been there before. We need to push, and I think that Markstrom would be a guy that they would view as he's done it in the past. Now, is he going to do it this year? We don't know, but I think the risk is too high because I don't think that Edmonton has the value, A, the trade value, and B, I don't think they have the salary to trade for like a Connor Hellebuck or like a UC Soros with the Nashville Predators. You know, I just don't think that they have that. Or I mean, even a Sergei Bobrovsky, which I think Bobrovsky a free agent this year? I gotta make sure I'm Puckpedia because I don't want to look like a fool and be like, oh, he's they gotta trade for they gotta trade for Sergei Bobrovsky when he's a free agent. He is an unrestricted free agent, so they actually could go out and sign Bobrovsky if they wanted. But again, what is Bobrovsky gonna want in money? Markstrom is making 6 mil. Like 6 mil is not that bad for your starting goalie. The only problem is what Markstrom are we going to see next year? Is it going to be injured and terrible Jacob Markstrom like this year, or is it going to be extremely competitive and big save and the devil's best player in the playoffs in 2025 playoffs, Jacob Markstrom? Is that the Markstrom we're going to see? We don't know. It could be a high risk, high reward for Edmonton. I think they would be a team that would be looking for that. Other teams that could use a goalie, and this is a situation where like they could just keep going with it they got. San Jose have first. Now they obviously do have Yaroslav Askarov and Alex Nedeljkovic. I think they just signed Nedeljkovic to an extension too, so you can't really move off of Askarov. You just, you know, bought for Askarov a couple years ago. Unless you want to move off of him already and just be like, oh, screw it. Like this goaltending situation has not worked out, even though we traded for, a former first round pick goalie like 5 years ago. Um, but San Jose with Macklin Celebrini being the best young player in the league, not the best player in the league, that's McDavid, but the best young player in the league, you want to push for a playoff spot starting next year. You have too many young talents, and you have the second overall pick too, which they might trade, they might pick with. We'll see what they do with that pick, but like I think you want to make a push for the playoffs, next year. Be competitive. And I think Markstrom can help you because goaltending wasn't very good this year for them. But then again, they have Askarov who they want to be the solution, the long-term goalie, and they have Nedeljkovic who they just extended. So that's why they're not in need of goalie because again, they're a rebuilding team. They want to come out of that rebuild, but they're a rebuilding team. And they already have two goalies under contract that they might run with for next year. I have Utah. They're in could because of the fact that they have Karel Vejmelka. I definitely do think they want a better backup slash 1B to Vejmelka because Vanacek didn't play a lot this year, and I think they want to take the load off Vejmelka. I just don't really see too much of a fit with Markstrom there because of how many games Vejmelka played this year. And Vejmelka, I think, led the league in wins for a goalie. But again, Vejmelka is not an incredibly great goalie. Utah is another team that they want to take another step because they made the playoffs for the first time in franchise history this season, and they have a lot of money too. Like they have money to spend. But if they trade for Markstrom, Vejmelka then becomes their backup. And let me just take a look at Utah's salary situation. Again, they have a lot of money, so they can afford to pay their goalies, but then they have a $4.7 million going to a backup and who's also under contract for the next 4 years. So they could trade for Markstrom, but I don't know why they would. It would just make more sense to go out and get a backup. Um, Florida is an interesting one. Um, Bobrovsky is a free agent, unrestricted free agent. I don't know if he'll re-sign in Florida. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens there if he walks from Florida. I'm not really sure where Bobrovsky goes. He could go to Edmonton. That's a good interesting option for them. Not really sure where else he could go. He's 37 now, so I don't know how many years left he has as a solid starter. This year wasn't great for him. Um, but if Bobrovsky walks, they need a new starting goalie. So I could actually put them in the need category as opposed to the could category. The only reason they're in could category is because I think they would want to go out and get a huge splash goalie like Hellebuck. I think they would probably look at Markstrom and be like, he's okay, you know, high risk, high reward, but Hellebuck is the best goalie in the league, especially in the regular season. Hellebuck has like been one of the best goalies in the league, and we saw what he did at the Olympics in 2026, and he's fantastic. Let's bring him here and build another small dynasty. Um, I have Toronto just because I know Toronto wants to move off from one of their goalies, whether that's Stolars or Joseph Wall. I don't know who Toronto moves off of. And then let's say they move Stolars or Wall. Do they just run with Hildeby as their backup? The problem with Toronto is you really need to hammer home the first overall pick, which should be Gavin McKenna. I'll do a draft preview on this channel at some point. I also have my podcast that I haven't plugged at all on this channel, but we'll be talking about that on our podcast too. But um, I think Toronto, you really want to get your first overall pick starting hot. I think you want to try to keep Matthews and Nylander. Now there were rumors, and there was actually a trade made. It was just didn't come in before the 3 p.m. deadline at the trade deadline day that sent Matthew Nyes to Montreal, which is insane. So I don't know if Nyes will be a Toronto Maple Leaf next year. A Devils maybe a potential Devils fit. We'll see. But I think you really want to hammer home like we're trying to get better for next year because this isn't a rebuild, this is a retool for Toronto. I think that's what they view, and I think solidifying goaltending would be something they want. The only reason that they're in could is because I don't know if they view Markstrom as that option. And again, Markstrom is 36. If you're a team that's like, okay, we're going to be building back up for another year, maybe two, like Markstrom would be like, I don't want to go to the team that got the first overall pick. I want to go to a team that can win the Stanley Cup. And then same thing for them. They're like, we're not ready to win a Stanley Cup now. We still need another year or two to build this up. Why would we trade for a 36-year-old goalie? Another team we have is Winnipeg. If Hellebuck gets traded, which I assume he will be traded, potentially to New Jersey, they would need a goalie back. Now, again, I put them in could as opposed to does or needs Markstrom, because maybe they just like fully lay into the rebuild. They're like, okay, we lost, Nikolai Ehlers, who just won the Stanley Cup, and we just lost our starter goalie in Hellebuck. We had to trade him away, and we weren't very good this year. Let's just full on tank. Why? Let's just have Eric Comrie be our starter next year. Let's move off of like Kyle Connor. Let's just blow up the team. But again, if like and this is a very, very unrealistic trade, but let's say Hellebuck was to be traded to the Devils. Maybe Markstrom is in a package back the other way, a part of the deal as a dump off. Again, that's not need and that's not incredibly realistic, but it's definitely a potential option. The thing that scares me about trading Markstrom with the Devils is that one, A, when you trade him, you need to bring in another goalie. Not within the same deal, potentially in a different deal. But if you trade Markstrom, there's a hole there as your 1A, 1B with Allen, or even as your pure number one starter. Um, Hellebuck, Saros, potentially options. Wallstead, potentially an option. Again, I'm gonna do a list. Those are just names. Those aren't 100% real options. I'm gonna go through a list in a later video. But when you move Markstrom, you have to fill the hole. This isn't a rebuilding trade. This isn't a, all right, we're going to tear it down for a couple of years and just move off our assets. This is, all right, we're reshaping our goaltending kind of move. So the difficulty is when you make the move, you have to make another move for another guy. Um, the second problem is what value does Markstrom have on the market? Like what would teams even trade for him? And the second part is what I just went through was what teams would even want him? You know, I made a short list here, but San Jose, Utah, Florida, Toronto, Winnipeg. I could see all of them being like, why would we want Markstrom? There's no point. The only team that I would really see being like, we want Markstrom would be Edmonton. And even then, I think what would be more realistic is Hellebuck being traded to Florida and then Bobrovsky just signing with Edmonton in free agency, you know, as like a little weird deal thing. Not a deal, but like being like, okay, Hellebuck is now in Florida. So Bobrovsky needs to be a starter somewhere. He'll be a starter in Edmonton, so kind of like one of those situations. So I don't know. It's gonna be really interesting. The one thing that I'm absolutely loving about Sonny Meta so far is like he does seem like he really wants to change this team. He doesn't want to just it be the same old. Um, and he wants to solidify the future. And we've already heard that with potential Hamilton and Nemeth stuff. We're hearing contract extension with Hischier, and we're hearing potential gauging the market for Markstrom. So we'll see what it is. We still got a couple more weeks until free agency, until July 1st. The draft is coming up. I think this is going to be a crazy offseason for the NHL in general, but I think it's going to be a crazy offseason for the Devils because I think we're going to see some moves. And I'm going to do a video coming up saying potential, a little preview for videos coming up. We're going to do a kind of who do I think the Devils could target, and that's going to include Markstrom's, goaltending if they move Markstrom, who I think they could trade for goaltender. Um, and who are some names that I think could be on the move that are not Shimon Nemec and Dougie Hamilton? Who are some names that, we didn't expect to be moved or were lower radar potential moves that could happen. So, um, that's my little video on the rumors. If you haven't comment, subscribe, you know, favorite if that's a thing. Send it to a friend. Maybe they'll send it to another friend. You know, maybe we'll build this up. I don't know. But anyway, thanks so much for watching.